Hey, welcome everybody. So glad that you are joining us again for our devotional. Today, we're going to be in one of the great stories in all of the Bible. I mean, it's one of the all-time greats, and it's found in Luke chapter 15. And of course, I'm talking about the story that Jesus told that we call the prodigal son. It's 2,000 years old, and that character, whether you've read the story told by Jesus or not, is familiar to so many people. When you mention the prodigal son, all of a sudden people, they have some kind of memory, some kind of thought about that boy. You know what? If I were to ask you right now, can you identify the prodigal in your family? Most everybody can always do that. And you know what? Maybe you're that prodigal, the rebellious one, the one who strayed. We all have people in our family like that. Maybe it's the one who strayed and then later returned. And again, maybe you're that person. We love this story because it is so relatable. So, if you think about it, that story, kind of the seeds of the story of the prodigal that was told by Jesus in Luke chapter 15, is retold in so many different forms, including films, songs, paintings, sports stories, novels, poetry, and even ballet. No kidding. Start thinking about it. The seeds of that story, the dynamics of the story of the prodigal son, are found in so many different areas. As a matter of fact, I wanted to take a quick moment with you and share one of my favorite adaptations of the story of the prodigal son with you. It's Norman Maclean's novel, A River Runs Through It. And that was later made into a movie, which is one of my favorite movies of all times. And you know what? Think about it. The story, the parable of the prodigal son is in that movie. It's set in Montana in the 20s. It tells the story of a father who was a Presbyterian minister and his two sons, Norman and Paul. And Norman is the older son. He's responsible, he's steady, he's dependable. And Paul, well, he's the younger son, and he's reckless and he's brash. And like the younger son in Jesus' story, Paul, in A River Runs Through It, is clearly headed for a catastrophe. But he's loved by his father. So maybe you've not seen the movie, A River Runs Through It. I would encourage you, check it out. It's really good. And you're going to see the story, in essence, of the prodigal son. What is it? What is it about this wonderful story that Jesus told so many years ago that resonates with us? Why? And I think it's because it touches all of us in the core. It's about parent-child relationships. It's about personal identity. It's about personal freedom, consequences of sin, forgiveness, and of course, unconditional love. It's also about jealousy, salvation, second chances, and other themes that you can think of. You put all of that together, it's all packed in this one amazing story told by Jesus in Luke chapter 15. And so the bottom line is, I think we love this story because it tells us about ourselves. We're all in that story. So what was it that Jesus intended for us to understand when he first told the story? Well, I do think it's about seeing ourselves in the story. And let me just stop here and say this. You know, one of the things that I love about parables in the Bible is that we can look and find ourselves often in more than just one character in a particular story. I'll be honest with you. I've started doing that more and more. Who am I in this story? And sometimes I'll be one character, and in another season in my life, I'll be a completely different character. It challenges us this story of the prodigal son. Who are we? And it challenges us to change. There's a wonderful author, he's passed on, by the name of Henry Nouwen. And he wrote a great book simply entitled The Return of the Prodigal Son. And it's all about his encounter with this story, this parable told by Jesus. And what really got Nouwen to thinking was a painting by the great painter Rembrandt, which is also called The Return of the Prodigal Son. And that painting is in Russia, the original painting. And Nouwen, he traveled to Russia, and he spent not just a few minutes, but literally hours in silence, gazing at that painting and just thinking about the story that Jesus told thousands of years ago that inspired that painting. The painting shows a repentant son. He's ragged, he's dirty, his clothes are torn up, and he's kneeling before his father, burying his face in his father's chest. Google that painting and look at it for a moment. And the father is leaning over that boy, his hands lovingly placed on the boy's shoulders as others look on. It's powerful. So, in his book, Nouwen describes how he learned to identify with each of the three major characters in the story. And I'd like you to think about it right now. By the way, we're going to read some out of Luke chapter 15 in just a moment, but I think most of you are familiar, at least with the shell of the story. It's a young boy who has an older brother, and he lives with his father, and one day he just says, "Dad, I'm tired of living here. Give me my share of the inheritance. I don't even want to wait for you to die. Just give me my share of the inheritance, and I'm out of here, and I want to live the life that I've always dreamed that I could live." And so the father does just that. And then it's the story of how the son, this younger son, takes his part of the inheritance, heads to what Jesus describes as the far country, and blows his money on just partying day and night. And then a depression, a famine hits the land. And this son now has nothing. And he finds himself in a pig pen, literally. And he starts thinking about going home. So, like Nouwen, who are you in the story? I think most of us can identify with being that younger boy who flees the father and squanders the inheritance and then returns. But we return broken, just like that boy. We have feelings from time to time of being lost and lonely, and we long to return to the Heavenly Father. I think a lot of us can relate to that character in the story, that young boy. And then, when we spend enough time looking at the story and thinking about it and reading it, I think we will find ourselves at times being that older brother who, if you remember, the story ungraciously refused to forgive his younger brother. The dad did, but not the older brother. And he would not welcome him home. He resented that the father allowed him to return and threw a party for him. Nouwen writes in his book this line. He said, "I suddenly saw myself in a completely new way. I saw my jealousy, my anger, my touchiness, doggedness, and sullenness, and most of all, my subtle self-righteousness." I don't know about you, but yes, I have been that older brother more than I want to admit. It's painful, but yes, I have been that older brother. But also like Nouwen had a friend who urged him to become like the Father in the story. Isn't that great? A vision of God. Now, can I say something? If you haven't already figured this out, the real core of the Bible is a revelation of God. Who is God? It's all about showing us what God is like. And I got to tell you, this amazing story in Luke chapter 15, the story of the prodigal son, the main point of the story that Jesus told was not the younger son, not the older son, but the Father. Because Jesus wanted us to know this is what God is like. This is how God will treat you. And so when we read Jesus' parable, we see ourselves in all these different characters. But what about the possibility of becoming like the Father? So if you've got your Bible open, let's do this pretty quickly as we close. Let's read beginning at verse 20. And we'll read out through the end of the story, okay? You there with me? So the younger boy has returned home. And it says, "But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to his father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine, who was dead, is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" The story of the prodigal son offers a vision of a God who opens his arms. You got to see this. Jesus is telling us this is what God is like. He's like this Father who opens his arms to embrace his children in love and in forgiveness. It offers hope to all of us who are estranged from him. This is what we'll receive when we come home. The younger son acknowledges his need for reconciliation, and he accepts the father's forgiveness with gratitude and humility. And what does a father do? He throws a party for him and welcomes him home. Grace, love. You know what? The older brother, he's just as lost as his younger brother. He just doesn't realize it. He can't see it. But what does the father do? The father goes out for him as well. Look at the story that Jesus told. And he invites him to the celebration. And he says, "My son, everything I have belongs to you as well." That's what the Father is like. And so, 2,000 years after Jesus told this story, you and I, who read it today, we're faced with the same questions as the sons in the parable. How will we respond to the Father's embrace. Have a great day.